I'm Joshua Adams, and this is the Industry Insights Podcast, where I am joined in the Rock Paper Simple studio by community leaders as we dive into industry topics and perspectives. Thanks for joining us today. I have Dr. Mark Rendell, Superintendent of Brevard Public Schools. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today you and I chatted, and I think we're going to talk about leadership in public education. Does that work for you?
Yeah, wonderful.
Awesome. So let's start at kind of the highest level. Let's define it, right? Let's talk about what it means to be a leader in public education.
Yeah, well, there are definitely different levels of leadership in public education. A classroom teacher is actually a leader of the classroom, leader of the students, that kind of thing. And then you've got building level leadership, so an assistant principal or principal. So those roles are a little different. And then you've got district level leadership. Could be an assistant superintendent or a superintendent. The role is always the same, though. The role is to keep the focus on the interaction between the teacher and the student. So the learning process, that's the flashpoint. That's why we all got into this profession, is to help students learn, grow, and mature, to teach them, social studies or mathematics or subject matter, but also to help them, become better citizens and human beings. So when you're the classroom teacher, you're focusing on creating that environment in the classroom that's going to be really conducive to learning, making sure you have strong routines and procedures in place, that the kids know what the expectations are. So you're like the leader of little people. If you're an elementary school teacher, you're definitely the leader of little people. As you go into middle school and high school as your teacher, you're a leader of not as little people, but still young adults and that kind of thing. And then as a building level leader, your job is to make sure that the teacher is supported so they can, fulfill their mission and do their job of teaching those kids in the classroom. So you're supporting that teacher if there's any discipline infractions or something like that. You're doing a good job of supporting them. You're providing them with the tools, the skills, the resources they need. So making sure they have all the, instructional materials they need, making sure that they have the right furniture and everything, and equipment. You're scheduling their day in such a way that they're supported and they can, continue their mission. And then at the district level leadership position, now you're really trying to provide those buildings with their resources. So now you're trying to make sure that you can strip away any hurdles, any obstacles, any things that take away from the mission of that classroom teacher and the principal and the other building level administrators to make sure they can do their job. Sometimes that's, like I said, stripping away some things, maybe pulling away, knocking down some barriers. It's also bringing support to them, making sure they have the resources, again, that they need, funding, supplies, materials, direction. Sometimes, that's part of the leadership, is making sure we know where we're going and what's expected. But, again, even as a district level leader, your job is to support that flashpoint, that teacher and student interaction in the classroom. So leadership really is not about you and your personal mission in education anyway. It's about making sure that you're supporting those people that are working directly with students in whatever capacity you're acting at as a leader.
That makes sense. And you're at that district level as
Right.
our superintendent. No pressure. But what does your journey look like? What was your leadership journey in public education? What did that look like?
Yeah. So interestingly, like when I was in high school, I decided I wanted to be a teacher. Had some impactful teachers and coaches in my high school career and said, that's what I want to be. In fact, if you look at my high school yearbook, we made senior predictions. And my prediction was that I was going to be a social studies teacher in the Bahamas with a blonde. And so that was my prediction. I actually still have my yearbook. I can show it to you. But so in 1993, my wife and I moved to Brevard County, and I started teaching history at Satellite High School. So not quite the Bahamas, but pretty close. Less than a mile from the beach. And my wife has light brown hair. So it's pretty close, but that's what I wanted to do. Those people had helped me grow and mature as a young person, kind of set me on my way. So I wanted to pay back and do that same thing. And then while I was teaching, both at Satellite, but also previously in Virginia, had some really impactful administrators, some principals or assistant principals that I said, wow, they're really doing something special. They're helping me as a teacher in my mission. So maybe when I grow up, that's what I want to be. So I got, involved in the master's program and did the things you need to do to become an administrator in Brevard County. Became an assistant principal at Melbourne High School first, and then O'Galley, and then principal at Titusville High. So that was my first principalship, THS 2001 to 2006. And so during that journey, and then we actually left and went to North Carolina, was a principal there, and then came back here to Brevard, and then went to St. Lucie County, but 4 times as a principal. And in each of those stops along the way and those growth journeys, I worked for some pretty impactful district leaders and superintendents. Some of our older members of our audience may hear some names like, Rich DePatri, Tom McIntyre, Bob Donaldson, Brenda Blackburn. These were all district level leaders in Brevard when I was kind of growing up as a teacher, assistant principal. And so again, I saw them and the roles, the things they did to help me as a principal or assistant principal in my journey, in my mission to support teachers and do the best thing we can for our students. So, well, wait. Maybe when I really grow up, I could be a district level leader or a superintendent, and got my doctorate along the way in that journey. And when I was in St. Lucie County as a principal, was promoted to the district office as an assistant superintendent. Mike Lannon was the superintendent at the time, and he met with me and he saw some leadership capabilities, I guess, in me, and said, maybe you could come to the district level and do some things. So I learned a lot from him and his administration. Some Janelle Yost, who was the deputy at the time, and saw district level leadership there and here in Brevard, and how you can make big changes at the district level that impact the individual classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You can bring resources, you can set direction, you can do some things that impact schools directly, but then eventually down to the classroom level. That you can't lose sight of the fact that all the way at the district level, you still have impact on the classroom. And so I was fortunate to become a superintendent of Indian River County for a few years, then came back to Brevard as a high school principal at Cocoa Beach. And now I've been the superintendent here for about 7 months. It's a huge responsibility, but I also think it's a huge honor. I think Brevard Public Schools is one of the best school districts in Florida. We actually moved back from North Carolina to have our kids graduate from, be educated and graduate from Brevard Public Schools. So all 3 of my children have had the majority of their schooling here in Brevard County. A lot of teachers are friends of mine and things like that from when I was teaching and when I was working in different buildings, but also as the teachers of some of my kids, and so definitely invested here in Brevard. But I think as the superintendent of any district, especially here in Florida right now, one of the big challenges for a superintendent is cutting through all of the outside noise and making sure that everybody in the district is still focused on that student-teacher relationship in the classroom, that flashpoint. That this is again, like the reason we got into education was for the mission to help teach and grow and mature these young kids. And so we ask ourselves at the district office, whenever we're making a decision, is this going to impact the classroom? And is it going to impact the classroom in a positive way or a negative way? And if it's going to impact the classroom in a negative way, we got to rethink that decision. If it's going to impact the classroom in a positive way, good job, we're making the right decision. If it's not going to impact the classroom at all, maybe we shouldn't even be involved in that venture, whatever that is.
Right.
So the challenge is making sure that everybody in the school district understands that's the mission. There's a quote from a former superintendent in Georgia who said, there are 2 types of people in this district, those who teach and those who support those who teach. We don't have room for anybody else. So the idea is if you're a classroom teacher, then it's everybody else's job to support you. If you're not a classroom teacher, how are you supporting that teacher in the classroom? So we challenged the district office, the central office there in Viera, to think about that. Like if you're a person that works in ESF, the Educational Services Facility there at Viera, how do you support the teacher in the classroom? Now, if you're working purchasing, then you can say, it's my job to find the best materials for our teachers at the lowest cost so we can support them with that. If you oversee transportation or you're a bus driver, my job to get the kids to school on time and safely so they can learn. If you work in food services, then your job is to make sure that kids are fed nutritious meals every day so they can learn, that kind of thing. So if everybody in the organization that's not a classroom teacher views their job as a way to support classroom teachers, then that's the goal. And then, of course, the classroom teachers need to know we just want them to focus on teaching, and we'll do all the rest.
So my next question to you is going to be, why are public education leaders important? But you just nailed it.
All right, good.
So I love that. I do want to chase that a little bit though. So you hit two reasons that just now on why those leaders are important, right? You hit initially, you showed the importance of that in your journey, right?
Right.
In your journey, those leaders not only supported you, but they inspired you, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah,
leaders creating more leaders, I think
definitely.
is really, really important. So those leaders in your life that said, hey, look at something bigger, look at what something, not only a path you could take, somewhere you could grow up to be, right? But it also supported you and inspired you. So I think that's one piece. Then you hit on, hey, our job is to support the classroom teacher, which I think is awesome. And so saying, hey, this is really, really important. What other insights do you have in terms of why are our leaders in the public education space so important, and why should others aspire to become leaders in that space?
Yeah, it's impact. So when you become a teacher, you want to impact children, right? And so you have a classroom of children. If you're an elementary school teacher, then it's 18 or so kids. If you're at the middle school or high school, you have multiple periods that you teach a day, so you could impact as many as 150 or more kids. So that's impact. And then when you go into those different levels, like assistant principal or principal at a high school, bigger impact. Now you say, okay, now I'm not just impacting one class of kids, I'm impacting a whole school worth of kids and teachers. I'm
Mm,
supporting the adults and the children in my mission. And then obviously going up to the district level, now it's again, now I'm impacting hundreds of kids, in several schools, and in Brevard County's case, almost 100 schools. We have 85 traditional schools, 14 charters. So basically 100 schools, 70,000 kids. So impact. But the one thing that I've also learned along the journey is to maintain that connection to the classroom. So, and I kind of learned this when I became an assistant superintendent in St. Lucie County, is um, you have to find ways to maintain that connection with the classroom. So I would go visit classrooms a lot, and not just visit and show up and read a book. I'll never forget, I went to Mrs. West's class at Oak Hammock K-8. It was the first month or so I was an assistant superintendent, and you go out to visit classrooms, and the principal takes you around and shows you, their best classrooms and stuff
right.
like that, where their best teachers are and things. And so I visited this first grade class, Mrs. West, and I read a book or something. And then when I was getting ready to leave, the kids said, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "Oh, sure, I'll come back." I didn't know if I was ever coming back or not. And Mrs. West, being the crafty veteran that she is, she stopped me and said, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "Yes, I will come back." Later that day, I got an email from Mrs. West that said, "When are you coming back?"
I
So I
love that.
started setting up these regular visits to Mrs. West's class, and got to credit Mrs. West, crafty veteran teacher. I would visit a couple times and read a book or so. First graders, it's fun. We sit on the carpet, we read a book, and then she started emailing me and saying, "You could do more than read a book when you come and visit. Maybe you could help teach a lesson." So she would email me, a week or two ahead of time of what we were going to be doing that day when I would come, because we set up these scheduled visits. And so she had me helping, teaching, being a part of the classroom. It was a really incredible experience for me because it kept me connected to the work in the classroom. It kept me connected to the kids. Really, though, it kept me connected to the challenges that the
Mm,
classroom teachers face, that Mrs. West faced. And so, again, anytime we had to make a decision at the district level about something, I could put my Mrs. West hat on and think about the fact that I was just in a classroom. And man, if we ask teachers if we give teachers another thing to do, how's that going to affect their work? How's it going to affect their ability to teach and give their full attention to their students and their work and that kind of stuff? So maintaining that connection to the classroom. So piece of advice, and I've kind of adopted a class every year at these different levels of district level leadership. I do have an adopted first grade class this year, Mrs. Bloom's class over at Sea Park Elementary. I see them every month or so, and I do take part in the instruction now. Mrs. Bloom is just as crafty as a veteran teacher as Mrs. West, and makes sure that I'm involved in the activities that we're doing, and I'm not just showing up and being a guest. But that's a challenge. When you, even at the building level leadership level as a principal or assistant principal, how do you maintain that connection to the classroom? You can go visit classrooms and you can kind of drop in, but make sure you're investing some time. in the classroom and make sure that you're trying to experience what the teachers are experiencing. So again, if you think that your role is to support them, that you're kind of spending a little bit of time in their shoes so you know what they're experiencing.
So, speaking of challenges, you mentioned understanding what the challenges are in the classroom. What are challenges that leadership in this space is facing currently?
Yeah, so a lot of it is who's in front of you at the time. What's the task in front of you at the time? So, we have a lot of different interest groups or constituents that are part of a public school community. So, obviously, students, teachers, employees, but we also are a public school system, so we answer to the public. The students have parents, and they're an integral part of our partnership. We've had a discussion with the board recently about, do we have customers? And if so, who are they? Are the students the customers, or are the parents and families the customers? Or are they clients? Are we providing a service more so, meeting their needs? And so when we make decisions, are we making decisions on the best interests of the customer client? Is that the student? Is it the family? Is it our employees and that kind of thing? So one of the challenges is who's in front of you at the time and what type of decision are you making? So, like if you're making a financial decision, you want to take a look and make sure that you're doing a good job of being a good steward of the taxpayer money. We are stewards of the public money. All of our money comes from
Of
the
course.
public, so we need to make sure that we're doing a good job of managing that money and not spending it frivolously. And then, how does that impact the classroom? How does it support teachers? How does it support your employees? So, one of the biggest challenges is determining who's in front of you, what type of message are you sending, what are their needs, how can you meet those needs, and what if you can't meet their needs, then how do you how do you go about trying to find a way to do that? Do you need to reach out to the legislature? Do you need to reach out to the community, to find additional support? Do you need to review and maybe redesign some of your practices? Maybe there are some things we're doing that aren't effective and we could remove those, to better meet the needs of some of the people in front of you.
So, what other challenges are public education leaders facing currently?
There's a couple things. One thing is resources. We have limited resources. A lot of times, if you're working in a private firm and you need to do something different, you can raise your prices. You can find different ways to generate income so that you can do things differently. We don't have that ability necessarily. Now, I do want to thank the voters for approving two different discretionary sources of income. One, they approved a sales surtax a few years ago, and that generates a lot of income for us for capital projects. And then just a little over a year ago, they approved a discretionary property tax millage that's generating some income that we can use to pay our employees more. So thank you to the Brevard County voters for that kind of support. But we're limited in that kind of generation of revenue. A lot of times, like I said before, if you're in a private business, you need more resources. You can find different ways to get more resources. You can even borrow money and do things like that. And we can borrow money too, but because we're a public entity and because we are funded through taxpayer dollars, we try not to do that. We try not to overextend and that kind of thing. So staying within our limited resources, I think that's a big challenge. Staffing is a big challenge for public schools right now across America. There's a teacher shortage that everybody calls, and it's not necessarily that a lot of teachers are leaving the profession. We're not really seeing more teachers leave the profession than normal attrition, retirement, that kind of thing. What we're seeing is not a lot of people entering the profession. My son graduated from Florida a few years ago, and not too many years ago, only a handful of years ago. And we were at his graduation ceremony, his commencement, and he was in the College of Business. And they actually did his commencement with the College of Education. And they called out the College of Education grads first to fill the arena, and it filled about 4 rows of the stadium seating on the arena. And then they called in the College of Business candidates to come in and fill in the rest, and about 30 rows.
Right.
So about 30 to 4. 30 rows of College of Business graduates and only about 4 rows of College of Education graduates. And University of Florida used to be a College of Education hub. You used to be turning out teachers left and right. And so we have to find a way to encourage more young people to choose education as a career. We do have a lot of second career people coming into education, people who start a career in something else and then decide they want to be a teacher, and that's awesome. We welcome them. It's usually a pretty good fit because they've already gone through their growing pains of becoming an employee and an adult and all that kind of thing. We don't have to go through those growing pains, and they just have to learn how to teach. And so we welcome them. Thank you, all the second career teachers that have come in and joined us. Thank you for that. But we do face a staffing shortage, and it's not just teachers; it's support personnel. We've had a bus driver shortage the last couple of years. We increased bus driver pay, and we've just about got a full fleet of bus drivers. So that helped increasing the pay, but also helping increase some of their helping support them in their working conditions with handling some discipline cases and stuff like that. But staffing is a challenge. That's something that it's not an easy fix. If you're again in a private industry and you're finding that one of your job types is hard to fill, then maybe just increase the salary, or do something like that. And we don't get to do that very easily. And so finding ways to make it more attractive to get into education, making sure that you're supported, as a teacher, and you're paid well enough that it can be a living wage and that kind of thing. So, but also those support personnel and everybody else. So that's one of the biggest challenges facing public education is staffing.
So speaking to that, let's talk future leaders, right? Let's talk the next generation of public educational leaders. What does that look like to you? What do you see? What are your predictions, but also what is your advice?
Yeah, so it's interesting when I was a teacher and thinking about going into a leadership role. About that time, the leader just needed to be a manager. You just needed to the joke was you got to keep the buses running on time, make sure the bell schedule is there and all that kind of thing. So principals and assistant principals were not necessarily asked to be anything more than a manager. And then as I entered leadership positions, it was about the time where the focus started becoming on the term instructional leader. Principals weren't just supposed to keep the buses running on time, not just to keep things under control on the campus. They were supposed to visit teachers' classrooms and start to help them improve instruction. So you had to become an instructional leader. So a lot of times people who had that other skill set, they were good managers. They were good at organizing. Maybe they'd been in charge of a department, or maybe they'd been a coach or something like that. And they had that skill set. They could still become principals, but the expectation was that you would be an instructional leader. So you had to kind of hone your skill set as an instructor or as an instructional leader. So when you start looking for future leaders during that time, you wanted to pick some of your best instructors, some of your best classroom teachers. And it's a little bit of a quandary, because when you have a really good classroom teacher, do you really want to take them
Mhm.
out of the classroom where they're impacting those students directly and then put them in a leadership position? And so it's kind of a catch-22. We can take this person and put them in a leadership position, and maybe they can impact more classrooms, and maybe they can work with teachers and help them improve. And so theoretically, their impact would be wider. But now you're taking them out of the classroom where they were an effective factor in the education sequence. And nowadays, I think we're going to be asked to do even more. I think a building level principal is not only going to need to be a good manager, to make sure the buses are running on time, to make sure everything's in order. Also, an instructional leader to make sure that they're supporting teachers in the classroom. If they see areas that need improvement, they can, work with the teacher and improve that. They know what a good instruction looks like. They know how to analyze data and make sure that instruction's improving or the outcomes are improving. But now I think there's going to be like kind of a third element. They're going to need to be really good at public relations. They're going to need to be really good at marketing. Our schools are now in competition. Florida is a choice state. We're a choice district. Families get to choose where they want to send their kids to school. And so you, as a building level leader, as a principal of a school, you want your school to be the one that everybody chooses. You want your school to be the one that every family chooses, that every teacher chooses to work at. So you're probably going to need to find some PR skills, some marketing skills. Some people are natural at all of that. Some people are natural leaders as far as organization, and they're naturally good, gifted teachers, so they're good with the instructional leadership. And some of them are magnanimous and have that personality that they're really good at working a room and it can bringing people along with their mission and that kind of thing. But I think if I were to look into a pool of potential building level leaders, and you'd want them to be all really solid classroom teachers, someone who's really organized and knows how to organize things. But also we're going to be looking for that skill that, hey, Ken, you do a good job of showing why your classroom was the best classroom. And now that you're a principal, that your school is the best school. What can you do to help market your school and all that? And it's not something that we can just put on the principals and say, you've got to do this by yourself. We've got to do a better job of supporting them at the district level and saying, hey, you need to we need to market your school. We need to do some things. So here are some tools that can help you do that. You need to be an instructional leader. Here are some tools we can train you on some things. We can show you how to do that. And, maybe that candidate had instructional leadership skills, that kind of talent, and they're really magnanimous and they're a good marketer, but they're not that organized and maybe not best at that first skill. Well, we can work with them on that too. But it's unfortunate that we keep asking more and more, more and more of our classroom teachers, more and more of our leaders. Same thing even at the district level now. I got to be a PR guy too, public relations, as well as making sure that things are running smoothly in the district, that everybody has what they need. And we've got, we're focusing on the right things, and we're improving in academic achievement and, employee retention and all that. I also got to go out and be a marketer. I got to do podcasts and things like that, and make sure we need to, tell everyone all the great things that are happening in our schools. And, years ago, we didn't have to do that,
Right. Right.
And now we need to do that. And it's good because it focuses us on telling our mission, and hopefully we have really, really good things to share. If we don't have really, really good things to share, then we got to do, got some work to do.
That makes sense.
So I think that future educational leader at the building level or at the district level or whatever, you're going to need those original skills of organization, secondary skills of instructional leader, and maybe a third area of being a good PR person.
I think that's a really great way of kind of summarizing a lot of what's being asked for in today's educational leaders. It's not just one dimensional. And if people look at it and go, okay, what does that look like? And I think they make assumptions. But you gave, I think, a good look under the hood of all these different pieces that are being asked for. It's one of the reasons that I think it's so important for us to honor and support our educators. My wife being a teacher for 7 years,
Right.
I got to see the front lines of that. I had no idea. Watching her be out the door before the sun and coming back home late, and then still working on homework for the kids or grading or whatever else she was doing. And so I see a lot of that dedication. And you hit on a lot of areas, I think, that are worthwhile looking at. And I think it's worth looking at the level of sophistication that's there as well. I think some people, again, make assumptions of what you guys do all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes we see portrayals, movies, TV shows, and, teachers show up at 8:30, leave at 3:30. Principals show up, just stand in the hallways, do lunch duty and stuff like that. And there's just so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
Most of your highly effective teachers kind of own it. They own being a teacher. They own their classroom. They're dedicated. They're passionate. They're committed. They're working way beyond 8:30 to 3:30. They're taking stuff home.
So.
They're coming in on weekends. Same thing with the leaders. They own the building as far as, this is my school and I'm going to do everything I can to improve this school. So I'm going to be putting in extra time. I'm going to get emotionally attached to my school. I'm going to make sure I'm doing things above and beyond. And so, yeah, I think it's a lot. There's a lot more to it than what we maybe see on a TV show or in a movie.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor, for coming in and sharing today.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Industry Insights. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe, comment, or even drop us a line over at rockpapersimple.com.